My name is Fernando Perez. I had the honor to serve as the executive director for this year's 2016 Hispanic-Latinx Student Union Conference, in which the title was called Juntos Logramos Más, Together We Conquer. The reason for that, the reason why we chose that theme is because we here at the University of Florida, the Hispanic Student Association, if there's one thing that we truly believe in, it's in community. We believe that together we can actually conquer more whenever we continue to work as a collective community, serving, having a great deal of synergy, knowing who we are to make sure that our future stays preserved and successful. After myself, we're going to be having our current HSA president right now, Esteban Torres. He's going to follow on, and Dolores will be up short. Thank you for your time, and once again, thank you all for coming out.
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you so much for attending. This is something that not only I've had a vision for the past year, but several people in this room have had a vision for this, and especially just bringing Dolores to campus. Today has just been such an impactful day filled with so much knowledge and wisdom that so many students are going to be able to leave here today and start community organizing themselves within their own communities. There were several students from different universities that joined us for our conference today, and so there's a lot of networking. And if you weren't able to make it out today, then definitely don't stop here. Continue organizing, continue networking with students across the state to bring our community forward. That's the goal. Yes, okay, so before I introduce the moderator and then also Dolores, I want to give some special thanks to a lot of great departments and people specifically for helping this conference come together. The first one being MCDA, Multicultural and Diversity Affairs. Thank you all so much. Yes, let's give them a round of applause. Everything that happened today could not have been done without them. There's such a great resource on this campus that we are truly blessed just to have them here. Special shout out to Hispanic-Latino Affairs, Black Affairs, and APIA Affairs, who specifically led the workshops and the keynotes that we had. So yes, again, another round of applause for them. Thank you so much. Thank you to the George A. Smathers Libraries for letting us use their space, and specifically this space, Latin American and Caribbean Studies Library. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you again for the Hispanic Student Association Executive Board this past year. It's been a long year, and it's been a year of many firsts. And it's been an honor serving as your president, and I'm so excited for the next executive board that I hope that everyone in here really gets behind them and encourages them and keeps them accountable for everything that you want to see your voice say. And then also to three special people in this room who this wouldn't have happened without them. Fernando Perez. Yes. The conference director. I had the vision, and I shared that vision with Fernando, and Fernando took that vision and made it go so much further. So thank you for all your work. Amy, where's Amy? Yes, everyone give Amy a round of applause. She put so much of the legwork behind this conference. All those, the booklets that you see, she did that whole booklet. So amazing, you're an amazing person, and I'm so lucky to have worked with you this past whole year. So thank you so much. Another round of applause for her, please. And then Brenda, she's in the back. She's doing all the sign-ins and doing everything. Brenda, you did a lot this semester that really contributed to this conference, and so thank you again. And let's give all three of them a round of applause again. Okay, so now for the event to start. I'm sorry, I know it's running a little bit late. So I'm going to introduce the moderator first. The moderator is Dr. Paul Ortiz. He has served as the past president of the Oral History Association. He currently serves as the director of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. And he also serves as the faculty advisor of the UF chapter of Dream Defenders, Chispas, and Venza, which is a sub-organization of HSA. And he also was a former boycott organizer of the United Farm Workers. Yes, United Farm Workers, sorry, I just making sure. And then a quick plug. He will be teaching class this fall called the African Diaspora in the Americas, which includes Mexico, Cuba, and other countries. And so if you are interested, please come talk to Dr. Paul Ortiz after the class. If we can, give him a round of applause as he approaches. And for our keynote speaker of this whole conference, Dolores Huerta, she has been an advocate for our community, for women's rights, undocumented rights, farm workers' rights, and so many more. And I'm just going to let her come up and talk to you all about that because I don't want to keep her waiting anymore, keep y'all waiting. So thank you so much. Can we all give a round of applause to welcome Dolores Huerta?
Well, good evening, everyone. I wanted to begin by thanking Dolores Huerta. You honor us by your presence at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and we're just so thrilled you're here, and thank you so much again. Thank you. Another round of applause, please. Dolores, well, thank you again for being here. And I wonder if we could start by, if you wouldn't mind telling me, who were some of your earliest role models when you were growing up?
Okay. Well, first, can I also just say I want to thank all of you for having me come here today, and I want to thank all of the students for giving up this beautiful, lovely afternoon when you could be doing a lot of fun stuff, all right? And to hear us talk, and hopefully that you will get fulfilled with the information that we give you here today that will help you in your future lives. And so, muchas gracias. Thank you very much for being here today, this afternoon. And thank you, the Hispanic-Latino Students Affairs Program and this Hispanic-Latino Students Union for having me here. Thank you so much. Well, I have, of course, like a lot of us in our lives, have several heroes and sheroes, right, that affected my life. One of them, when I was very young, I was a Girl Scout, okay? From the time I was 8 till the time I was 18 years old. And my Girl Scout leader, a great, wonderful woman named Catherine Kemp, really influenced me a lot. And the other influence in my life, I was very fortunate that where I was raised in a town called Stockton, California, which is not too far from San Francisco. Everybody knows where San Francisco's at. But Stockton was kind of a rural community, but it was an agricultural community, and we had so many ethnic groups that I grew up with. So I was able to grow up with many different ethnic groups, Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, African American, Italian, Greeks, et cetera, and Okies, okay? People that had come in from the, they come in during the Depression. And so that was really wonderful for me because the fact that I was able to grow up with so many different ethnic young people like myself and people from Mexico also that had come in there. And so it really gave me like a really broad vision because, we were able to hang out with each other, eat each other's food, try to learn each other's languages as kids. And that gave me such, I think, a broad spectrum in terms of my future life and made it very easy for me to be able to relate to people from different ethnic organizations. Then I was fortunate to, in my 20s, to meet a great human being. By the way, there's recently been a book written about him, and I'm going to say his name just to see if anybody in the audience have ever heard of this great human being. His name was Fred Ross Sr. No hands on? Oh, you do, okay. Well, you're a professor, okay? But the reason that this gentleman's name is so great is because nobody knows who he is, okay? He was such a great organizer, and his whole mission in life was to help people, to help them to organize themselves. And I was fortunate enough to have met him, and that is when I decided to change my life from being a school teacher to become an organizer, because I found out that you could make a lot of changes when you organize people and got them organized together. They took direct action, and then you made great changes. And it was in an organization that he had organized called the Community Service Organization that I met Cesar Chavez. And Cesar Chavez and I worked together in that organization and until we left to start the United Farm Workers Union. And I also have to say my other great mentors were two great women, besides Catherine Kemp, my Girl Scout leader. One of them was Gloria Steinem, and I think everybody knows who Gloria Steinem is, right? She's a feminist leader who started Ms. Magazine. Oh, and I need to add that Ms. Magazine is still alive and well today. It is now owned by the Feminist Majority, of which I am a board member. And the president of the Feminist Majority is another great woman that had a great influence on me, and her name is Eleanor Smeal. And I would recommend that sometime you invite her to come and speak at this campus, okay? Because she is a great feminist leader. And that was really important for me because I think like many of the women in the civil rights movement, we were so busy fighting for our people, our raza, that we forgot that it was important to fight for our women, okay? And that was a real life-changing experience for me to realize that, yes, we have to, fight for everyone, but women, we have a very special battles in our life that we have to overcome. And that made a big difference also. I could just have maybe a couple of more people. The Kennedy family was very close to Robert Kennedy, who was a great human being, and continued to be close to Kerry Kennedy, who is fighting for farm worker rights in the state of New York.
Dolores, in those early years before, even before the CSO, Community Service Organization, what were the main issues facing agricultural workers? What types of lives did they lead? What were the working conditions that they had to deal with?
Well, it's rather interesting because during World War II, the farm workers actually made about the same wages that industrial workers made. But then what happened back when the World War II started in the 40s, they brought in large numbers of foreign workers from Mexico. They call them the braceros, Public Law 78. And and this went on into, before the end of that program, there had literally been millions that were brought into the United States. And of course, they treated them pretty much like slaves, and they didn't make very much money. And the domestic workers, the local farm workers, their wages really, really dropped a lot. And it wasn't until that program was from 1942 till 1963. I believe it ended in 1963. And when it ended in 1963, then we were able to organize farm workers. Cesar Chavez and myself worked very hard to end that program. This next week, on Sunday and Monday in Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court will be discussing Obama's executive order, DAPA, and DACA, and these are the executive orders that allowed, number one, children that were brought here as children that were undocumented so that they would be able to go to college and, as you know, be able to get work permits and in some states driver's licenses so they could work. And the DAPA is the deferred action for parents, so that parents that have citizen children born in the United States will be able to remain here in the United States. So those programs are going to be discussed at the Supreme Court level. The hearings are going to be held this following week, on Monday and Tuesday of next week. So we will be there. And the reason I'm mentioning this, and this is somebody, if somebody wants to research this, the reason I'm mentioning this is because when the Public Law 78, which was the bracero, or foreign worker program, ended in 1963, guess what happened? They legalized the braceros from Mexico without any legislation. Okay? Just like that. They just did it. And I remember when that happened because we had been working to end that program, and they were allowing the people who had worked here on that farm worker program to get their residency in the United States. but they weren't allowing the women and the children to come in. I flew to Washington, D.C., and met with Douglas MacArthur II, who was a deputy undersecretary at the Secretary of State's office. And I said to him, you're allowing the men to come in, but not their wives and their children. And he said, oh, we'll fix that. And they did. Without any legislation, okay? I mean, just like that. And they only needed, in order to immigrate to the United States, they only needed 3 documents. They needed an offer of employment from an employer or a labor contractor that would say, I am offering fulano de tal, Jose Lopez, I'm offering this person a job for 12 months, a year-round job. Then they needed a second letter that said, from somebody in the community, that said, I will sponsor Mr. Lopez and his family so they will not have to go on welfare if something happens, you know what I mean? If they lose their job or whatever. And then the third document was a set of fingerprints. That was it. So Cesar Chavez and myself, with some of our volunteers that were helping us organize the Farmworkers Union then, we were able to process hundreds of documents so that people could immigrate to the United States. Isn't that something?
Wow, that's amazing.
And when you think about what people are going out, you know, having to go through now to be able to immigrate to the United States, and that then it was just so simple.
Dolores, I mean, along the same lines, what made that possible in the 60s? It seems impossible now. When you tell that story, people are like, wow. I mean, what's the difference?
Well, it's really interesting because this was done so quietly that probably only of those of us that were really involved with the farm workers knew that that was happening, you know? And in 1986, when we passed the amnesty bill in 1986, you know, I referred to that. I was working with Congressman Howard Berman from California then to pass the amnesty bill in 1986. And so I told him this story about, and of course nobody wanted to believe, how could this possibly happen? But then they went into the records, and sure enough, they showed this big spike of immigrants that came in at that period in time. And using that historical information and that data, that is how we were able to get amnesty back in 1986 for the farm workers. So in the 1986 amnesty bill, we were able to legalize 1,400,000 farm workers. 1,400,000 farm workers. And of course, and then there were several million. And again, guess what? The farm workers again. What documents did they need, okay, under that bill? And you can research this. All they needed was to prove that they had worked 90 days for 3 consecutive years in agriculture. And they had to have that proof from some employer. And their fingerprints. Okay, and that was it. And of course, there, you know, other documents or birth certificates or whatever. But another note again, and now we can kind of veer a little bit to talk about the racist history that we have in the United States. Here in Florida, and what part of the amnesty bill that we passed, the provisions were that anybody who had worked in agriculture. So, from Washington State, all of the Christmas tree workers were eligible. All of the nursery workers were eligible. But what happened in the state of Florida? The head of the Farm Bureau here in Florida went to Washington, D.C., and somehow he was able to have some influence on the regulations, you know, for the farm worker amnesty bill. And you know what he did? He said that sugarcane was not an agricultural product. So what did that do? That left out all of the sugarcane workers from Jamaica, from Haiti, from the Barbados Islands. Probably left out about 40 or 50,000 farm workers because they happened to be of African descent, okay? It was a straight, outright racist act that they did. And there was one law firm, I believe, in Florida that tried to fight that, and unfortunately they lost that lawsuit. And I still can't understand how they did that, how they lost that lawsuit. But that again goes to our racist history and the policies that are based on, and by the way, for these workers, it would have been so simple for them to qualify for that amnesty bill because they had to sign a contract when they came here. So there was it was a lot of the other farm workers, they had to struggle. They had to go around and talk to employers that they had worked for to make this proof that they had worked these 3 years, these 90 days for 3 years. But for the workers from Jamaica and these other islands here from the Caribbean, it was very simple for them because it was all documented by the federal government because these were federal contracts when they came here to work. And so that was one of the important things. The other thing I just want to note, because this is kind of a historical conversation that we're having, is that the other thing I want to note is that it was the Democrats that passed that bill. I just want that to be on the record. It was Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy. It was Peter Rodino from New Jersey, the Democrat, and because they called it the Rodino bill, okay? They called it the Rodino bill. It was Congressman Howard Berman. Schumer from New York, who was now the senator. He was then in the Assembly on the Judiciary Committee. And we even had a couple of Republicans. Hamilton Fish III was instrumental. But it was really the Democrats that passed that bill. And I say that because in the elections that are coming up in November, you will hear the Republicans saying, oh, it was Ronald Reagan that passed the bill. Oh, but actually, the Republicans did really nothing to help the bill out. It was the Democrats that pushed the bill through. Reagan signed the bill, because he happened to be the president of the United States, but he really didn't do very much to get the bill passed.
It's an excellent history lesson.
Thank you.
And it really reminds us about, because a lot of people now can have a really hopeless attitude, a really negative attitude, and say, well, it's not possible to have immigration reform. But you're giving us a primer on the history of what is possible through activism, through political pressure.
Absolutely. And the other thing, too, that we have to remember, and I think all of us know this, but, we just have to constantly remind people that this is a nation of immigrants, right? And unless you're Native American, your people came from somewhere, Your people came from somewhere. And so we have to, I think, constantly remind people. And in fact, in the 1920s, we had more foreign-born in the United States than we had native-born, because that's when the country was just being, was growing, and they needed workers. And the other thing, too, is that you didn't have to be a citizen to vote. Okay, people just voted. They didn't bother to become citizens, and nobody asked them to become citizens. And that, of course, is just the opposite of what we're seeing now with voter suppression laws. We were just in San Antonio, Texas, yesterday. We just came from there. And when I told the folks there in San Antonio, they're in California, you don't have to have an identification card to vote. You just go in there and give your name and you vote, right? And you could vote by mail. Just sign a little card, and you want them to send you your ballot. And they were shocked. You mean you don't have to show an ID to vote? No. And that's all part of voter suppression to make sure, especially aimed at people of color, to make it harder for them to vote.
Dolores, I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking, because one of the questions the students had this morning was, how do we become active in the beginning? How do we begin to think about making a difference? And you were a school teacher, which is a profession. Normally people will say, hey, that's a great career to make a difference in. But something happened to you in the classroom, and you saw something happening to your students. What kind of pushed you down that road of becoming an activist?
Well, actually, I'm going to go back before the classroom. My first what I can say, well, I was very active, of course, as I said, in the Girl Scouts. I was active in my local, I actually organized a few teen clubs, okay, where we used to, have dance contests and play table tennis, and that was before video games. Okay. But growing up again, being Mexican American, and like I mentioned, all of the ethnic groups that I grew up with. And as teenagers, we would always hang out together, and we were always harassed by the police. We were always being racially profiled. They didn't call it that then. And it was constant. We'd come home from a football game or a basketball game, and the police would stop us. They would search us. They would have, give everybody a hard time. A lot of our friends were arrested. Sometimes they were beaten up by the police. And so you grow up with this anger of this injustice that's happening just because your friends happen to be black or Filipino or Mexican, So you kind of grow up with this anger. So, you know, and I belong to social organizations also, but my big awakening, and this is something that is so simple that everybody in the room can do it, was when we formed the Community Service Organization, the CSO, when we were organized by Mr. Fred Ross. The first thing we did was go out to register voters. And we went house to house, okay? Knocking on doors. So I call it Organizing 101, okay? So, and I really recommend it for everybody here, because when you go out there and you're knocking on doors and you're talking to people that you don't know, and you're trying to, you know, tell them the importance of voting, how important it is, and then you hear their stories and their complaints, and then you're, you know, in the process, you're actually trying to get them, make them understand how important it is for them to participate in the electoral process. So I think that's a real, I call it, it builds your emotional fortitude, right? It makes you really strong, and at the same time, you're doing something very important. But in going door to door, I remember going to a house, coming to a house of a farm worker, and there was nothing on the floor except dirt. Their floor was a dirt floor. Their furniture were orange crates and cardboard boxes. And seeing the children in that house that were obviously malnutritioned, and it made me, you know, upset, because I knew, coming in an agricultural community, how hard these people worked, you know, to be able to try to earn a living. And then again, when I was teaching classes and seeing the farm worker children come into my classrooms with kind of the same situation, and having to go beg my principal, who by the way was from Arkansas, and the kids that were in my classroom, they were not Mexican kids, these were white kids. And they were like what we call the Okie kids, like the kids that came in from the Southwest to California. And he would say, oh, their parents, they just drink up all the money that they make. And I knew that that wasn't true. And so that's kind of when I made the decision that I could probably do more good organizing than I could as a school teacher, organizing the parents.
All right. One of the questions our students had was, we were talking this morning, and by the way, I don't know if we HSA students have told you, we just elected our first ever in the history of UF, first ever Latino student government president. But it was
Wonderful.
But it was quite a struggle, as you can imagine. Can you talk about what it was like as a woman to become involved as an organizer, and challenges you had with gender and machismo, sexism, things like that?
Well, I think unfortunately we know, like, racism is alive and well, machismo is alive and well, right? And the only thing I say to the women in the room is that you have to just hang in there, and you know it's going to happen. You have to kind of have your guard up, because you are going to encounter machismo, because it's, again, so much of our culture. And you have to just kind of figure out, I know people call it scheming, I call it planning, all right? Okay, figure out when you're trying to reach and organize something that you're working on, and figure out, how can I do this without having some guy get in the way and stop me, right? Or take credit for my work. Okay, that's another big thing, okay? So, and you have to just kind of have your little radar up to be aware that this might happen to you. And luckily now, women have protections that we didn't have when I was growing up, because sexual harassment is now a crime, right? And if women get sexually harassed, then you can report them. And I know a lot of times women don't do that because we're afraid we'll lose our positions, or we'll, you know, somehow we'll get some retribution some other kind of a way. But I think the other thing I would say that when you get out there in the workplace, I always try to organize a support system. Belong to some women's organization, Professional Women, National Organization for Women, National Women's Political Caucus, Latina Leaders. If there isn't a club, organize one yourself, okay? So that the people that you're working with know that you are connected with these other women's organizations out there. And I think it gives a little bit of shield there, so that you know, co-workers and other people that might try to take advantage. And I think another thing that we have to do in our society is that we have to really start educating our women not to be victims. Because when you think that women, we are the majority of the population, the other thing is that when we look at the animal kingdom, who are the most ferocious, the male or the female species? So what happens to us? I mean, we have somehow, our society, we are indoctrinated from the time that we're little girls that we should be dependent, that we are taught that somebody's going to support us, somebody's going to protect us, right? And then we find out that that may not be true, okay? And Disney tells us Prince Charming's on his way. And he's going to give us a big kiss, and we're going to live happily ever after, right? And sometimes the opposite happens, because this pretender Prince Charming comes along and gives somebody a big kiss, and before you know it, baby's daddy is gone. Or as you get older, you're turned in for a trophy wife that looks like you looked like 40 years ago. So I think that we have to think in terms of an education to start educating our women to be strong, and so that we can't be dominated, we can't be seduced, we can't be manipulated, and I think that we have to start really looking at the way that we educate our women, because when we're little, we're told, don't get that white dress dirty, don't climb the tree because you'll fall down and hurt yourself, don't be out there wrestling with your brother, that's not ladylike. And so everything that we're told, we are really taught to be victims from the time that we're little. So that I think we have to change that mentality. I was very fortunate. My mother was a feminist. She divorced my father because he was abusive, And so she was always the dominant force in our family, and she was a very strong woman and always kind of pushed me out. I was actually very shy when I was young, but she was always making me go out there and be in public life. I took dancing lessons, I took music lessons, and she always wanted me to be out there and to be a strong person.
Can you talk about, these amazing, strong women, can you talk about the women in the United Farm Workers, or even in the National Farm Workers Association in the early years, and what you saw and the role they played in building the union?
Well, women always played a strong role. I was a co-founder of the United Farm Workers, and initially when I started having house meetings, and I want to talk about that at some point, to organize the union, I think I inhibited myself, and I think sometimes we inhibit ourselves as women too. I like to talk about this survey that was done in one of the East Coast colleges. I need to mention this, where they asked a bunch of male students if they thought they were qualified to run for office, and 80% of the men said, "Of course we're qualified, right?" And when they asked the female students the same question, only 30% of the women said that they were qualified. And why is that? Because I think that in talking about this, women think that we have to be super prepared to do everything, right? Now, I think the men in the room will agree with me that the guys say, "Oh, we'll learn on the job, okay?" We'll just learn on the job, is that right? And so women, I think, we have to be more of risk takers and have more confidence in ourselves, because sometimes we don't have that confidence in ourselves. And so when I first started having meetings with the farm workers to organize the union, I really have to say that I only had one person deny me a meeting, because everybody else, because the one thing that I found out, and this, I think, whenever you go in there and you want to help people out, and sometimes we think, I'm fortunate enough to have a college degree, I'm going to college, I'm going to go in there and help these maybe farm workers that don't have the opportunity to go to school. And we kind of feel a little bit, it's almost like a little reverse discrimination, because we kind of feel kind of guilty in some respects. And I felt that way also. I thought, I was lucky enough to go to college, and I was a teacher, and I'm going to go down and organize farm workers. And I remember discussing this with Cesar, and I said, "Gee, Cesar, sometimes I feel a little guilty. I think like maybe the only thing I can offer is I'm bilingual, I can type, right?" I remember taking my adding machine with me. And then he said, "No," he said, "remember this, if the workers could have organized without your help, they would have already done it, okay?" So always, and the thing that I found out is that people, when you're trying to help them, they see your sincerity. And even at the beginning, if they're a little suspicious of you, Because if you, okay, what's in it for them, right? For the person that's organizing. But then once they know that you're being sincere, you're not trying to take anything away from them, you're trying to help them to help themselves, then people will respect you. And I think that's the main thing, is that you just have to have that, I call it having faith in yourself and having faith in the people that you're trying to help, And if you get those little, if somebody kind of looks at you funny, or to kind of just ignore it, because you know that you are doing the right thing. You're trying to do the right thing. And I think that's the main thing, to remember that. So, and then of course, I think the only time I had more problems with the other leadership in the union than I did with the workers. Because again, what do they do? Try to take credit for your work, right? And sometimes they get in the way when you're trying to do something. And I won't say that about all of the guys in the union, but some of them, yes.
Dolores, in the history of the UFW, now more attention is being paid on the really critical role that Filipino workers play. Can you talk about the role that they played in the early years?
Well, and there's a little bit of misinformation out there about that, because I am the one that organized Larry Itliong, who was the leader of the Filipinos in Stockton, California. I went out there because before I organized a group called the Agricultural Workers Association. This is before we had the United Farm Workers, and I had an African-American organizer, a Latino organizer, an Okie organizer, a white organizer, and I needed a Filipino organizer. So I went to all of my Filipino business people that I knew, and I said, can you give me the name of somebody that would like to help us organize a farm worker group? And everybody said, Larry Itliong. So I went and I found Larry Itliong, and I asked him to help me out, and he did. And we were kind of doing this under the auspices of the Community Service Organization initially. And so then when César and I left the union to start the National Farm Workers Association, I kept up that relationship with Larry. I actually, let me go back a little bit. The AWA, Agricultural Workers Association, became the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee because the National AFL-CIO was interested in what we were doing, and they decided to fund it. And so AWA became AWOC, Agricultural, and I was the Secretary-Treasurer of that group, but then they started working with the labor contractors, so I left, and Larry stayed behind. So,
what were your first impressions of Cesar Chavez?
Well, Cesar was a very humble person. In fact, when I first met Cesar, I was organized in Stockton, and Cesar was organizing in Oakland, which is a town that's about, I guess, about 70 miles away from Stockton. And Mr. Ross said, we talked about this great guy, Cesar Chavez, and he brought him over so we could meet him. And he said hello and goodbye in a quick second, okay? So, I mean, he was so shy. So then we were going around to every short, brown man. Are you Cesar Chavez? Are you Cesar Chavez? So I didn't really get to know Cesar very well until we worked together in the CSO. Mm-hmm.
What was it like working with him? I just have to ask that.
Well, it was okay. I mean, Cesar was he's a genius. I mean, he only went to the 6th grade, but very, very intelligent human being, very committed. I mean, I have never seen anybody that had this strong will like Cesar. I mean, he was determined, and he was also very resilient, because in the course of the Farm Workers Union, we had to change our tactics and our methods many times, and he could do it on a dime, you know. And then people had a lot of faith in him because his commitment was so great. You know, he worked day and night in the organization. We worked from 8 o'clock in the morning. That was our regular schedule to 6 o'clock, and we have to do on campaigns. We would work many, many hours. And Cesar was always there, you know, sacrificing with everybody else. And I get to understand Cesar Chavez. Let me just explain this. He was a devotee of Gandhi. And I hope that everybody, if you haven't read the story of Mahatma Gandhi, please read it, because it was the idea of people coming together, people working together, and putting all the resources together and doing, you know, things to be able, like, you know, in Gandhi's case, because they were getting the independence of India, but they did it through the nonviolent action. They did it through marches, right? And many people were killed, you know, in the process while they were getting the independence from India. You know, teaching having the Indians make their own cloth, the spinning wheel. That was a big symbol. So, and Cesar really fasting to make changes. And that's what Cesar did also. He had 3 long fasts, 2 of them for 25 days, and the last one for 36 days. These are water-only fasts. And he did this, of course, to promote nonviolence. And also, the last fast that he did was to bring attention to the issue of pesticides. I think in that really did awaken the American public to the fact that we have poisons on our food, economic poisons, which are called pesticides. So that's the kind of a commitment that Cesar had. I don't know how many of us could do that, go like 36 days without eating, with water only. But that showed kind of the strength that he had. I want to say something else here too, because I don't want to be here and talk about this without you knowing about this. But the first martyr that we had in the farmworker movement was from Florida. She was a young woman. Nan Friedman was her name, a young Jewish girl was actually from Boston. And we had a big strike here for the sugarcane workers. They were Puerto Rican, African-American, Jamaican, and Mexican workers. And she had come down to volunteer. She was only 18 years old. And she came here to volunteer on that strike, and she was run down by a truck. And her name was Nan Friedman, but that was the first martyr that we had in the United Farm Workers.
Dolores, you mentioned earlier you wanted to talk about house meetings. Like what happened? What is a house meeting for people that don't know, and why was it important to the organizing?
Well, this is kind of the basic way of organizing that, again, the great Mr. Fred Ross taught us. And if I say the word Tupperware, does that strike a bell with anybody? Okay, and basically, and this is the way that we still organize in my organization, the Dolores Huerta Foundation. And what we do is we hire organizers, we train them, and then every organizer has to meet with maybe 5 to 6 people in their homes. But and then out of that meeting, and we talk about the issues that we have in the community. And then we talk about how people that look like them have been able to solve similar issues. Like when we used to talk about the farm workers, we would talk about how they got unemployment insurance, how they organized to be able to get toilets in the fields, drinking water in the fields, the right to organize. And it was just ordinary people like farm workers that were able to make these great changes. And so every organizer then has to meet with 200 people, and then they bring them all together, and we form an organization. And in the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we call it Vecinos Unidos, United Neighbors. In the Farm Workers Union, we call them the Farm Workers Union, right? And then what we do is once we get them organized, they have to vote whether they want to form an organization or not. And then we break them down into neighborhoods, and then they have to decide what is it in their community that they want to change. So then we meet, and they have to make a list of priorities. You can't change everything at the same time. So you make a list of priorities, and they have to select, and they have to vote 1, 2, or 3 things that they want to change. And then we make a plan. Okay, how are you going to do this? So, for example, we have one committee that we had that was concerned about the water rates that they were charging them. And so we formed a committee to go after the water rates to see if we can, because they were going to double their water rates, and how to stop that. And we were able to do that. Another committee wanted to have a swimming pool in their neighborhood. Okay, so we made a plan of how they're going to get that swimming pool. Another group, they wanted to have street sidewalks and gutters in their neighborhood. They now have 18 streets that have sidewalks and gutters. Another committee had all of these homes that were hooked up to septic tanks, and they wanted to have hooked up to sewers, so they did that. Another committee wanted to have a gymnasium for their school. They didn't have a gymnasium. So they got together, and they passed a bond issue, and they registered the voters and got the people out to vote. And they passed their bond issue with like over 70% of the voters. And so these are just things that these committees do that they're able to make these things happen. But the trick is that guess who does the work? They have to do the work, right? Once you make that plan, they have to volunteer. Who's going to do this and who's going to do that? And the great thing about it is you have all this leadership that comes out of these people that attended the house meeting and the general meeting, and they volunteered to do the work. And 11 of the residents that we have organized in Southern Kern County, they are now elected to office. They get themselves elected to office. We have one lady, I'm going to just mention her name, Leticia Prado, speaks very limited English. She makes sure that all of the meetings are translated into Spanish and all the documents are translated into Spanish. And she got herself elected to the school board. Well, found out that the principal was trying to eliminate the breakfast program for the farmworker kids. She said, what? I mean, taking away the breakfast program? So guess what? The principal's gone, and the kids have their breakfast program, right? Then the same woman got herself elected to the water board in another little small town. They're adjacent little communities, and she lives kind of in between both of them. And she got herself elected to the water board. When she got elected, they had just hired a new water manager, and he was getting paid like $160,000 a year. That was the contract that he was going to have. So she started looking into his background, found out that he had been fired from another community for embezzlement. She got rid of him, okay? And so, so this is, and I think this is what, the organizing, grassroots organizing is all about. It's about empowering people to be able to take up these positions, to get on these boards, because that's where our tax dollars are being spent, And, and we just had another victory in another little community where they found out that the director of curriculum at this school district, that he was getting $160,000 a year. This is a school district that has 3,000 students. This man's getting $160,000 a year, and they found out he didn't have a credential. And the parents found this out. Guess what? He's gone too. And so it's the power of the people, right? And once the people get organized, then they understand that they have power. And so we do a lot of work in civic engagement in my foundation. Part of going go door to door is making people understand, of course, that they should register to vote, that they should vote, and they should get involved. And in California, I have to say this. Let me just tell you a couple of things we're doing in California. I think that will excite you. One of them is we are taxing the millionaires, okay? Millionaires have to pay 3% more in state taxes than, if they make $1 million, 3% more in state taxes. You make $500,000, you pay 2% more. You make $250,000, 1% more. As a result of that law that we passed in California, we have brought over $6 billion into our state funds. And the majority of that money has gone to education, okay? And then they passed another law that said that all of the school districts get their money directly. They can decide how they're going to spend their money for education. But as part of getting that money, they have to involve the community, they have to involve the parents, and they have to involve the students. So that really gives us a really good chance to organize parents in all these districts. So it's just awesome. And to see the parents take control, and they can say, hey, we want to see your budget, okay? We want to see how you're going to spend your money. So we have right now, one of our biggest fights that we have is with our high school district, and that is because of the large expulsion and suspension of African American and Latino children. I mean, they suspended over 1,000 kids, in one school cycle. And this is so wrong. And I mean, for willful defiance or things of that nature. So we have sued the school district to make them stop that. So we have a lot of fights going on, but it's exciting because when I talk about these victories, it's the parents and the students that are doing the fighting. And in the fighting, in the process, that's how they're developing their leadership. So we have, like I said, 11 of our residents, and these are farm workers, construction workers. One of our leaders works she's a housekeeper in a hotel that now sit on all these different boards. Wow. Exciting.
It's very exciting. Dolores, what was the biggest obstacle you faced as an organizer when you were beginning, and how did you overcome that?
I think the biggest obstacle that all organizers have is just fear, right? The people are afraid to get involved, or maybe they want to get involved, but they don't know how. And so when you set up an organization, you're basically giving them a vehicle of how to get involved. And I think that's the main thing that we have to learn, because right now, like, we are facing so many, how shall I put this? I'm going to use the word threats. we're facing so many threats in our society right now. We know we have this huge income inequality where the 10% has more money than the rest of the 90% of the United States of America. And we say, how can that happen? We have this law called Citizens United that was passed. And the Supreme Court acknowledged when they said the corporations are people, and they can give unlimited amounts of money for political campaigns. And Jim Hightower, who's an activist from Texas, he says, I'll believe a corporation is a person when they execute one in Texas, okay? And we know that's not going to happen, okay? So we have these big obstacles that we have right now. I would actually like to say that I think our democracy in the United States is in jeopardy. It really is in jeopardy because when you can have people like the Koch brothers who have $40 billion, these very wealthy men who get their money from coal and they get their money from petroleum, and they can literally buy the Congress because they can put so much money out. There's unlimited amounts of money, and they don't even have to disclose where the money's coming from, and they can buy people to the Congress who are going to make the laws against global warming. People against alternative energy. And so we have really our planet, our Mother Earth is at stake right now. Can we save Mother Earth? Are we going to get to the tipping point where we can't do anything to save it? They're trying to destroy what we have left of labor unions. And I know in Florida you have a right-to-work state. And when we talk about right-to-work, what does that mean? That literally means that when people try to organize into a labor organization, that they can't sustain that organization because they are not allowed to have their dues, their fees deducted from their paycheck. The way we have Social Security deducted from our paychecks, right? And that goes directly to the union. And when we think about what does that mean, those dues, those fees that go to the labor union, what is that money used for? It's used to protect the workers on their jobs, to make sure that they don't get fired unjustly, to make sure that they have seniority rights, that nobody, that they have to be taken into consideration for promotions on the job, et cetera. So those fees are like an insurance. Like when you buy your automobile, you have insurance to make if you get into a wreck or something, right, that you're protected. Well, those fees that you pay when you're a worker to a labor union means that you are buying protection for your job. And you're buying protection for the union to represent you at the state capitol or in Washington, D.C., when they try to take the rights of workers away. And so we have right-to-work site here in Florida. You have 26 states now that now have right-to-work laws. And that really means that unions are threatened, and they're very weak. And when we think of the middle class of the United States of America, the reason we have a middle class is because of labor unions. Because we wouldn't have an 8-hour day, we wouldn't have weekends, we wouldn't have safety standards, we wouldn't have Social Security, you wouldn't have workers' compensation, we wouldn't have public education if it were not for labor unions. So when you destroy labor unions in the United States of America, you are literally destroying the middle class. And when we destroy the middle class, then you don't have a democracy. And then we have the situation that we are now seeing where you have, again, the 10%, the people like the Koch brothers, these $40 billion wealthy men that they can then buy the Congress. And really, and I know that word's been tossed around recently with Donald Trump running, and I'm going to use the word right now. You have fascism, right? You have fascism. Or as the great Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega y Gasset said, if you do not have an educated citizenry, then the greedy and the powerful will control. And that's what's happening in the United States of America. So anyway, I think that that's something we really have to pay attention to. And by the way, we are going to have elections in November. So we have a great opportunity for everybody to go out there and do that knocking on the doors that I talked about, okay? Everybody can get out there and do that.
All right. Dolores, I think we have one more question, and I think we're ready to move to Q&A after this. But today in our workshops, we were looking at photographs of you in your more recent activist work. And we talked about the issue the concept of intersectionality. You know, you work on not just one issue, but many. And so we saw you with picket signs and megaphones supporting LGBT struggles, the Fight for 15 movement, the Walmart strikers. Could you talk about your activism today and why you think all these causes kind of intersect and why they're important to support?
Well, I think that if we think of the overall connection to all of these causes, it's really simple. It's called human rights, right? It's human rights. It's women having reproductive rights. You know, women can have a control over their own body. Families can decide how many children they want to have, or if they don't want to have any, that's up to them. That's their decision to make. People shouldn't intrude on a woman's body, right? You know, when you talk about the LGBT issue, again, it's a human right. People should be free to marry the person that they love without anybody interfering. It certainly doesn't affect your life, right? Yeah, we should respect people's choices and who they. And I want to say also the transgender issue. You know, when they talk about transgender young people in schools should be able to use the bathroom of their choice. It's like at home, right? When you have your bathroom at home, everybody in the family gets to use that bathroom, right? Regardless of their sex, right? So some of these issues, and when you think about why the right wing, why do they do this? Why do they concentrate on women's bodies and on immigrants' rights and they're attacking LGBTQ? I think it's a distraction. They do this to try to keep everybody focused on those fights, you know, trying to protect our human rights over here, because the real issue are the economic rights over here, right? So, you know, where people are not being paid what they should be paid. We talk about the $15 an hour fight. Actually, if our wages would have kept up with the cost of living, the minimum wage should be $30 an hour. That's what our minimum wage should be today, $30 an hour. So when you're talking about the $15 an hour minimum wage, it's just barely scratching the surface of where we should be. But that's, I think, and when you think of us as consumers, and that's what they call us, right? I don't think we should be called consumers. We should be called citizens, right, of the country and residents of the country. I don't think we were born to make other people rich. We're not born to make other people rich, right? And we should think of, you know, the resources of the world and of our country should be shared by everybody. You know, one of the things that we never think about is that when we look at the Latin American countries, I'll mention a couple of them, Bolivia, for instance. The president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, he thinks that the natural gas of Bolivia belongs to the people of Bolivia. Okay, Hugo Chávez in Venezuela, he said the gasoline of Venezuela belongs to the people of Venezuela, not to Shell or you know, any of these other big companies. And in the United States, we never think about that we should own our natural resources. You know, that we should be, in Norway, for instance, a few years ago, there was an article in the paper that said that Norway, this little teeny country, Scandinavian country, they had a $400 billion surplus in their country. Where did they get all that money from? Their oil. They own their oil. So if we owned our natural resources and not that we have to pay for our telephone bill and it goes to somebody else, right? And water bill, whatever, that money should belong to everybody here. And it should then we would be able to pay for college tuition. So that people, as Bernie Sanders has been saying, and I do agree with Bernie on that issue, although I don't think it can happen overnight the way he says it can, okay? It needs to take somebody like Hillary to make it happen, okay? Show you where my stripes are. But I think we could have that. And in fact, I want to throw out a challenge to you. And this is my challenge. Because you do have this Latin American studies at this university, I think they should study and see why it is that a little teeny country like Cuba that has an economic boycott, I'm talking about a country that is very poor, how can they afford to give free education and free medical care to the citizens of Cuba? And I think we should do that study and then take it to the administration, whoever wins, right? And say, if they can do it, why can't we, right? Why can't we? And maybe if we own our natural resources, we could. So anyway, that's a challenge.
Let's give Dolores a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, my name is Carol. So one of my questions is, so you're doing a lot of organizing. So I want to know, I guess I'm curious because many times I want to be more involved in group organizing, but sometimes we need money to be able to put a lot of items together. And so like, how did you manage that? Like, you know, whenever you needed money to be able to like travel and provide like whatever was necessary for the event or whatever you were trying to do. So, yeah.
Well, I think you probably brought out the biggest issue that we have in doing grassroots organizing is finding the resources to be able to do it. And probably the biggest resource that we do have that doesn't cost a lot is our time, you know. So with my history, I was like a volunteer organizer with the Community Service Organization for about 5 or 6 years before I ever got hired. And at the same time, I was having children during all of that time, and you know, dragging my kids to meetings with me because I couldn't get babysitters for them at that time, and pay babysitters, and asking people in my family to help me and to support me do this because I just felt that calling so strongly. So I think if you go out there and just you know, whatever you're trying to organize, it's just, first of all, you know, give it your time that you can give it. And I want to say, and I know we have a lot of students in the room, so they don't have this issue, but I think as women, we have so many responsibilities, and sometimes we have to say, like I like to say, for every unmade bed in my house, some farmer girl would have got maybe $1 more an hour, right? You know, so we have to kind of simplify our lives and you know, delegate a lot of the responsibilities, especially we as women have, to give us the time. And I think that's the main thing that we do have is time to go out there and organize, and then find somebody, an ally that can also work with you or people to support you. And again, I think that's hard because I think again as women, it's always hard for us to ask people to support us and to help us in what we're doing. So I think it's really important that and especially I think with our Latinas, any Latinas in the room here, culturally, you know, we always feel like, I don't know, we feel like we shouldn't be asking people to help us, and it's hard. And I mean, I have 11 kids, by the way, you know. So my children were growing up when I was doing all of this work, and I had to ask everybody to help me with my kids to be able to do this. So the main thing is you've got that passion, you want to do something, you know, give it your time, and then ask somebody to help you, and then eventually you can find maybe sponsors. Like with my foundation, I left the United Farm Workers in 2002, and I was fortunate because I did get a gift of $100,000, but I didn't use the money for myself. I put it into an escrow account. And in that escrow account until I was able to start the foundation. But we still struggle. My foundation now, we have about 20 staff people, and you were going out there and always having to raise money and try to get grants, or we do fundraisers like a golf tournament and do different kinds of events to raise money. But the main thing is that if you can, you know, just volunteer your time to make it happen. And it will happen, especially if you feel very strongly about it. I know when I quit my job teaching and to go work with farmers for no money at all, and everybody thought I was absolutely crazy, right? And I had one of my compadres said, "Oh, your kids all going to grow up to be drug addicts." Well, I'm happy to report that my oldest son is a doctor. He's an MD, okay? And family practice doctor. My son Emilio is an attorney, public interest attorney, who's now running for Congress, by the way, in California. Emilio Huerta. If anybody wants to send him $5, it's Huerta for Congress. You can get him on the web, Huerta for Congress, yeah. And I have a daughter who's a teacher. I have a daughter who's she's an emergency room nurse, an ER nurse. And my daughter Camila, my youngest one, she's the executive director of my foundation. And so you don't have to worry about, and I could go on and on because my kids are all pretty good, you know. Anyway, they all survived their mother, their upbringing, and I took them along with me to marches, and so they grew up in the movement, so they understand the movement. And so, you know, it's really beautiful. By the way, I just want to say this. When we think about going to school and getting our degrees, think about coming back and serving your community. Don't ever think about, I just want to go out there and make money. I'm sure that this group doesn't think that way, but tell some of your friends if they're on that track. Because the biggest legacy that we can give to our children is a legacy of justice. You know, because we're put on this earth to make the world a better place. And right now we have so many opportunities to do that with so many different organizations, so many groups that are out there working to make the world a better place. And I think that we can make it happen. But it's going to take people like yourselves that we can really, because we are the majority, you know, people of goodwill, people of color, women, white men of conscience, yay. Okay? We are the majority, but we've got to be involved. We've got to be civically involved. We've got to be engaged and get other people engaged too. And when people say that voting doesn't matter, tell them it does matter. It does matter. Like your person who won 127 votes here, right here at this college here. So it's very, very important. And each one of us, when we engage and we get out there, so we might say, we have so many votes in this room, but if we go out there and canvass and go door to door, or we phone bank, you know, then we can actually, each one of us can get an additional 30 or 40 people out to vote. Can you imagine how many voters that is? Right here in this room, it's over a couple of thousand votes that we, right here, could get out to vote. So that is so important.
So the message is get active. We all need to get active, right? And stay active. So I've been giving a message. We have time for 2 or 3 more questions that folks, okay.
So one of like a buzzword here at the University of Florida is community. A lot of us have used it. A lot of us use it very actively. So what does that word mean to you, and what does it look like?
To me, community means caring for one another, you know, sharing, supporting, assisting, mentoring, going out of our way to help each other. You know, when we see an opportunity that someone might be able to take advantage, sharing that opportunity, kind of always being alert to see how we can help other people. You know, I think that's what community means to me. You know, and then sharing food together also, and sharing experiences together. In our organizing, every time we have a meeting, we have food. Because I think food is very important to really bond people together, and I think that's a very ethnic thing also. You know, I know when I would go out to organize farm workers and have house meetings with them, I would maybe have a couple of house meetings or 3 house meetings in one day. I made sure I didn't eat because I know every house I went to, I was going to have to eat, right? Because they were going to give me food. And so I think food is a very big bonding experience. And also celebrations, you know, dancing. How about that, okay? I think dancing, when we start doing this, these new educational experiences for women, and then we'll have to have like an additional educational experience to make sure all the men learn how to dance, okay? And by the way, dancing is good because it keeps you young. I just had my 86th birthday, by the way, on Sunday, okay? And dancing makes your legs strong, okay? Makes your legs strong. And as you get older, they say that's one of the first things that starts going in your body is your legs, right? So if you do dancing and you do marching, you know, protesting, that keeps your legs strong.
All right, a couple more. Yes, Deanna.
Dolores, I love that you mentioned food, just because Hispanic-Latino Affairs is known in student affairs as we have food at every event. So we know that that's where most of our budget goes, just for food and food. But I actually had a question, and I wanted to ask you, what is the importance of our students maybe going back to their communities to serve as opposed to maybe leaving their communities? If you could expand on that.
I think that's really, really important to go back to your community. I remember attending a seminar once when somebody said, if you want to do anything, you've got to get out of the valley, the Central Valley of California. This is where we work. Bakersfield, California. Bakersfield, California is a lot like Immokalee or Homestead. You know, it's an agricultural area, very racist, as you could see what I was talking about suing our school district for the expulsions of Latino children. In that school district, 72% of the students are minority. Only 14% of the teachers are of color. One African-American principal in the whole school district. 3 Latino principals in the whole school district, you know? So, you know, we have to kind of break down the systems, right? Break down the systems of oppression. I think that's exactly what we're doing. So, and people say, well, you have to, if you want to get somewhere, you have to get out. No, we've got to go back. Remember Dr. King's speech that he made, and people kind of don't really know what that meant. When he had that great speech that he made, I Have a Dream speech, he said to the people there, go back to Alabama, go back to Mississippi, go back to Georgia. So we have to go where we need to make the changes. So, and I think that's the whole thing about organizing means sacrificing. We talk about sacrificing time, for instance, you know. It's about sacrificing. It's about going out there and giving up a part of your life. And like in the farm workers movement, we had so many young people like yourselves that dropped out of school and came to work with the movement. And they learned all these organizing experiences. And it's really fascinating as you go across the country to see how many of them, when they went back to their regular lives, that they excelled. You know, presidents of labor unions, you know, people that are working in the environmental movement. Just everywhere you keep running into them because they learned their organizing skills and they learned to sacrifice when they worked down there to work with farm workers. So I really recommend it to be able to do that, go down there and come back to your community, because this is, when we think about Florida, for instance, okay, this state is changing so much. You know, you have so many people of color now. You have in fact, I was in New York City. Where are all the Puerto Ricans going? They're coming to Florida, right? The Puerto Ricans, they're leaving New York because they can't afford to live in New York anymore because it's been so gentrified. So they're all coming to Florida. The Dominicans, where are they coming? They're coming to Florida, right? The Mexicans, they're coming to Florida, you know? So you have a big difference now in the ethnicity here. But we know that all of these groups, they need help. They need to be organized, right? They need to be able to invited to participate. And by the way, when you're going door to door and you're talking to Latinos, they sometimes feel like they have to be invited to vote, okay? And we can tell them, you know what, when you get that ballot with all those names on it, you don't have to vote for everybody, okay? Just vote for the people that you know, because sometimes, like they say, no quieren quedar mal, right? They don't want to make a mistake, and they think that if they don't vote the whole ballot, that they're making a mistake. And tell them, no, you don't have to vote the whole ballot. Just vote 2 or 3 things that you know, who you want to vote for president or city council or legislature. Leave it blank. The things that you don't know, leave it blank. Okay, to give them that confidence that they need to be able to vote, because that's another thing that we have. People don't vote. And people don't vote, again, that leads to this income inequality and all of these terrible laws that they're passing against women, against LGBT people, et cetera. So think of yourselves as missionaries, okay? Think of yourselves as missionaries because you're lucky enough to get an education, and think of all the people out there that are not fortunate like you are, and to be able to use what you know, what you've learned, to go back and take it back to the community. That's really important. So thank you for the question. That's a really important question. Thank you.
So you spoke about people of color and trans lives in the LGBT community, but for some reason it's very misrepresented inside the UF community. How would you make our community more inclusive?
Well, there's a saying by a Mexican president. He was the indigenous president of Mexico, Benito Juárez, and he had a wonderful saying that I love. And when it comes to women's choice, reproductive choices, when it comes to people's choices of whom they want to live with, fall in love with, or marry. And his saying in Spanish was, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. In English, that's translated, respecting other people's rights is peace, right? Respecting other people's rights is peace. And we can say respecting other people's human rights is peace. And I think that that's an education. And unfortunately, we have been so indoctrinated, in terms of women's reproductive choices, in terms of people's sexual, orientation. And so we have to kind of undo so much of that in our brains. But I think if we can say that to people, especially with our families, because sometimes our families, and I think we should not be afraid to broach the conversation and to bring it up, because sometimes it takes people a while to be able to change their mindset because they have been so indoctrinated in the other direction. And so we've got to be like educators also and explain to them that these are human beings, I mean, God made each one of us different, right? We're all different. And so people have to respect that and understand that everybody is one of God's creatures, But so, I think sometimes we have to do, when people do make a sexist joke or a racist joke or a homophobic joke, that we have to kind of call them on it. And sometimes maybe privately, depending on the situation, and sometimes we may have to do it publicly, right? Depending on, I call it instant education, okay? An instant education.
I would like to know what your foundation, what you all work on.
Well, we have different projects. We're now up to about 20 staff people, and we did a lot of work in infrastructure work, like I mentioned before, and people are still kind of working on that. But we have a huge part of our staff is working on the education issues. Again, on this opportunity that we have to get students, and we're probably working in about 5 or 6 different school districts to get parents and students involved in their school districts so that they can have recommendations and change some of the decisions that are being made about how that school budget money is being spent. We also have a youth group where we do a lot of work on getting youth involved, taking these farm worker kids up to the sequoias, to the mountains, to learn about nature and learn about the environment, teen pregnancy prevention, and youth leadership development. By the way, when I was talking about people being elected to office, in one of the towns that we work, the city council, the majority of the people on the city council are under the age of 25. And a couple of them came out of our youth group. So sitting on the board, the city council is really great. And so we do civic engagement work. We have about 20,000 voters in our area that have now identified with us, and we bring the different issues to them. We worked on the millionaire's tax that I talked about before, which is now going to be voted again to get it renewed in California. We also worked on another important legislation to reduce felonies to misdemeanors, so that a lot of people were able to get out of jail. And now we're helping them process those applications, and especially for people that are going to be eventually applying for amnesty. We want to try to get for legalization to try to get those felonies reduced to misdemeanors. And so then we're doing a big campaign. Well, two. We have so many. We just passed in California Health for All. As part of the Affordable Care Act, so undocumented youngsters under the age of 19 can now sign up for the Affordable Care Act in California. So we just finished doing a really intensive door-to-door campaign to get people signed up for that law. And so then we're doing a big health and nutrition program also to get people moving. We had a cumbia bike ride where we had 77 people on bicycles, we call it cumbia bikes, to the music, cumbia music. And then we're doing a walking bus. So instead of kids riding to school, it was really cute to have all like these big cardboard cutouts, like a bus, and all the kids carry the cardboard cutouts. And so this is every single day now. We have kids walking to school instead of riding to school. Okay, again, and then doing nutrition programs because we have an epidemic of diabetes in our community, and teaching people how to eat healthy. And then another thing we're working on is to get the schools to open up their gates so that we can use the school grounds for recreation. And instead of having the police be the supervisors, to get our local recreation district to supervise. So we have all these, and the reason we can do all of these different programs is because we have all these different committees of all these people that we organize, right? Because they're basically the ones that do all of the work. So it's really, and people are just buzzing and just doing all of this great work. It's really, really important. Then we're also organizing, where we have all of these people organized in these different communities. We are organizing neighborhood committees to make sure people are registered to vote, to make sure they send in their absentee ballots, and make sure that they're educated how to vote and that they vote. And what we have been organizing, our people are voting 15% higher than the rest of the county. So, once they know how to do it, then they do it. So it's all very, very exciting. So thank you. So I do want to just close with this. So, and this, I like to do this everywhere I speak. I just say to people, I want to ask everybody here, and I'm going to ask you a question. Actually, a couple of questions, okay? But the question I'm going to ask you, who's got the power, right? And I want you to say, we've got the power, okay? Okay? So I'm going to shout it out, and I want you to answer me, and shout it out loud. Who's got the power?
We got the power.
Okay, and when I say what kind of power, I want you to say people power, okay? Okay, what kind of power?
People power.
Okay, let's do it one more time. But this time we're going to say, when I say what kind of power, I want you to say voting power, okay? Okay, who's got the power?
We got the power.
A little bit louder. It's like we're not sure, okay? Okay, let's shout out really loud. Who's got the power?
We got the power.
What kind of power?
Voting power.
All right, that sounds a lot better. One more thing, too. We talked about racism a lot, and I think that one of the things we have to fight for and work for is to get our people on school boards, and then we have to fight to make sure we get ethnic studies from kindergarten, okay? Kindergarten, all the way to 12th grade, so that all people will know what the contributions are of people of color. How many people know that the White House and the Congress were built by African slaves? It's not taught in our school books, is it? Okay? Or the contributions of people from Mexico, Mr. Trump, okay? That continue to work very hard today and that built the country, like people from Asia and, the Philippines, the Chinese, Japanese, people from Europe, the Italians, the Irish, etc. This country was built by immigrants, so we've got to get ethnic studies and women's studies, right, into all of our schools. And one way that we can really think of ending racism, and I'm going to ask the question out here. I know we have college students, and I hope a student answers this one and not a teacher, okay? What is the scientific name of our human race? Homo sapien, right. There was a little rumble there. I heard it, okay? Okay, and again, I want a student to answer. Where did our human race begin? Africa. What does that mean? What does that mean? Okay, that means that we are all Africans, okay? We're Africans of different shades and colors. I like to say that when our human family began in Africa, they traveled across the planet, went to Asia, got lighter in skin, came down to the Bering Strait to the Americas. One of our tribes got lost, went way up north to Europe where it's very cold. They lost their color, right? Now you have to go to the tanning salon or to the beach to get your color back. And so we could say to the Ku Klux Klan, to all of those people, some of those in the Tea Party, white citizens councils, get over it, you're Africans, okay? Just get over it, okay? And, I had my own DNA done, and not myself, but this television station said, how Latino are you? And so they came and they did my DNA. And I said, well, my mother's family was from Europe. They were from Spain and France. My dad's family was from Mexico. And so I said, I'm probably about 60-40. Well, it came back, I was 65 European and 35% indigenous, right? But then I said, did my Africanness show up? And they said, yes. It was 0.003. But they said, guess what? You're also 0.005 Neanderthal. And that's from the European side, because only Europeans are Neanderthals, okay? But so we can remember this, okay? That we're all Africans, okay? We're all Africans because we, of different shades and colors, different nationalities, different ethnic groups, okay? So I'm going to share a word with you from South Africa. The word is Wozani. And that word means we are coming together to fight for justice, okay? We are coming together to organize and to work and to fight for justice. So I want all of us to share that word together. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and I want us to share the word Wozani, okay? Wozani. That means we're coming together to work and fight for justice. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, and we'll all shout Wozani very loud. 1, 2, 3.
Wozani.
One more time. 1, 2, 3.
Wozani.
One more time. 1, 2, 3.
Wozani.
And now I'm going to ask you, can we get out there? Can we do, all of us become organizers? All of us become missionaries for justice? Can we go out there and can we do the work? And I'm going to say, can we? What do we say? Yes. We say, yes, we can, right? That's what Obama said. When I met President Obama, he said, I stole your slogan. And I said, yes, you did, okay? Because the slogan in Spanish is, sí se puede, okay? So, we'll say this so Mr. Trump can hear us, okay? In Spanish, okay? We're going to say, sí se puede, and we're going to clap and do an organized hand clap. Okay, let's go, all together, let's go. Okay, let's go. Sí se puede. So thank you, and you always remember, where's the power? We've got the power, and the power is where? It's in each and every single one of us. When people were asking César and myself, how did you organize the farm workers? They're poor, they're not citizens, they don't have papers, they don't have money, they don't speak English. And we would say to the workers, you know what? You've got power, and the power is in your person. In your person. And this is all the power that you need. We know individually, we can't do anything. The only way that we can accomplish anything is when we come together and we take direct action. Just like the people that we've been organizing, the poor people and the farm workers. And that's the way that we make things happen. Sí se puede. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.